We are coming to the end almost of our series in Proverbs that we've been preaching through this summer. And today we're going to talk about something that is something that all of us experience in some fashion, and that is family. We're going to talk about family today, how we've been shaped, and for better or for worse, in whatever family you have grown up in and whatever family you have created and are working in right now. This is the thing that we're parents, we're children. Some of us are grandparents, some of us are adult children and teenagers, and family is such a big deal. It goes back to the very beginning of creation, the very beginning of history. You go back to Genesis chapter 2, and before there was anything called the church, like we are doing right now, before there's anything like a town or a community or a government or any other social institution, God created the family first, and it was so important that when God came to this earth in the flesh, when Jesus, the Son of God, came here, he thought it was necessary to bring it up and to talk about it and to confirm and emphasize how important it is. Matthew chapter 19, haven't you read, Jesus said, that at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female, man and woman. And he said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, who will also leave her father and mother, and the two will become one flesh. Two become one, and eventually they multiply and they become a family of 3 maybe, or 5 or 10, or however many you decide to go for, right? But it starts with the family. It starts with the mom and dad. And so family is one of God's first and greatest gifts to us, and when it goes right, it's awesome. It's fun. It's supportive. It's helpful. It teaches you. There's learning and growing and laughing. And family's a great thing when it goes right. When family goes wrong, not so much. Not so much. And Proverbs points it out. Family, when it goes wrong, it can go very wrong. And then it's not fun, and it's not awesome, and it's not supportive. It is miserable. I'll just give you one, for instance, out of the book of Proverbs. There are 5 Proverbs that I could find that are repeated in the book of Proverbs word for word in 2 different places or more. 5 Proverbs. One of those Proverbs is this, Proverbs 21:9 and Proverbs 25:24. Exact same wording, verbatim. Here's what it says. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. When family goes wrong, it goes very wrong. It's better to live, right? It's better to get out your ladder and climb up to the top of your roof and, put your back against the chimney and just stay there than it is to be down inside, same room, same house, same bed, with a person who just wants to argue with you all the time. When family goes wrong, it goes very wrong. Of course, that verse is written from Solomon's point of view, right? And so I thought to myself, because we all know that it goes both ways, I thought to myself, what would happen if I would ask AI what Proverbs might say if Solomon's wife wrote that verse? Here's what ChatGPT said. Better to send him to the basement than share a house with a husband who says, calm down, when you're very clearly calm. ChatGPT is very wise, at least in that it's not a one-way thing, right? It's not just a quarrelsome wife. It's the punk husband, right? It's a two-way thing. All of us who are married acknowledge that we've done our own part to contribute to things going wrong in the family dynamic. We'll come back to that in just a minute. We've already talked about husbands and wives a little bit in this series on Proverbs, and so today I want to focus on some of the other family relationships, parents and children, and being adult children and grandparents. And so what I did is I went into the book of Proverbs on my computer and did a search. I did a search for every word that's associated with family that you can think of: son, daughter, mother, father, grandparents, family, parents, all those words. I looked those up, and I came up with about 100 different references to family in the book of Proverbs. In other words, Proverbs talks about family a lot. You think about the book of Proverbs and the whole book, the whole context of the book, and we talked about this a little bit early on in this series, the whole context is written in the context of family. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1, right, very first verse, right off the bat, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. And just a few verses later, he begins his advice to his own son. And he says, listen, my son, verse 8, listen, my son, to your father's instructions, right from the very first word. Wise counsel from a dad to a son on what is the best way to work yourself into this design that God has created, this order that God has ordained. And how do you work yourself in? Son, you got to work yourself into this order morally. How do you do that? You got to fear the Lord. That's how you start. Son, you got to work into this world ethically. Here's how you treat other people. You got to work your way into this world practically. Son, you're going to need wisdom in all kinds of areas of your life. You're going to need wisdom about sex and wisdom about your appetites and wisdom about emotions and friendship and all kinds of things. And this whole book goes through giving advice from a dad to a son all the way to the very end, where Proverbs ends with this picture, a beautiful picture of this mother and this wife, this woman who is an amazing person who manages her household so well that she's praised by her husband, she's praised by her children, she's praised by her whole community. Here's one of the things that this family emphasis in Proverbs tells us, and this is not rocket science, okay? Family is so important because your family is the first relational context in which you're going to learn to live skillfully. It's the first relational context in which you're going to learn to become wise. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about friends. The first quarter of your life is dominated by the influence of your family. And Proverbs is basically saying, if you can get a healthy foundation in learning how to relate to other people as you are growing up, then that sets you up for success in the last 3 quarters of your life, right? When it's a different stage of life, and you get this last 3 quarters of your life and you're not with your family anymore. Now you are grown up and you're on your own. And not only that, but you're on your own and having to interact with other people without the assistance of your mom or your dad. And so all that wisdom that you gain in the relational context of your family as you're growing up is going to pay off later. That's what Proverbs says when you kind of get out on your own against difficult circumstances. Here's where you need to be careful about that point that family is so important. Because when we talk about the importance of family, it's easy to make it sound like everything in your life depends on this, on that first quarter of your life. Everything depends on having a healthy and intact and functioning family. And all of you sitting in here know that there's no such thing as the perfect family. Even if you had a great family, it still wasn't perfect. And some of you, had a great family growing up. Some of you didn't. Some of you are in the middle right now of trying to build a family that is better than the one that you grew up in. Some of us are just trying to make the best of a situation that we would not necessarily have chosen for ourselves. There's no such thing as a perfect family on this earth. And you know that, and yet it's hard to remember it. Because we look around and our neighbors and our friends, they're on Instagram, right? And they're on Facebook and they're posting pictures and everything looks, they come into church on Sundays, maybe, and they look perfect. They're healthy and they're intact and they're functioning. And you know what? They've got their own stuff because there's no family that's perfect. We've all got stuff. And our families, they all look different. Not every family is a mom and a dad and 2.5 kids. Right? We all look different. And so maybe your family growing up or your family right now is maybe not like you wish it would be. Maybe it's not like you hoped and planned that it would be. But the advice of Solomon in Proverbs is still for all of us, no matter what your situation is. Because Solomon understood that family isn't simple. Let me give you a quick example out of Proverbs. I came across 2 different Proverbs when I was searching brothers. I was looking for stuff about brothers this week. And I found these 2 verses. That the contrast of these 2 verses really, it jumped out at me. Proverbs 17, Solomon says, a brother is born for a time of adversity. A brother is a person who, when you're in a tough spot, you can count on him. You can count on your sibling. You can count on your brother or your sister. Depend on them to be there for you. But then, one chapter later, he also says this, Proverbs 18:19. A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. You see the difference there? There's nothing more maddening than a family relationship That's gone bad, isn't it? I mean, you think about the different relationships that you have. And I grew up with 3 siblings, and there were all kinds of times when we were clashing. I had one sibling in particular where we really just butted heads all the time, and it was years and years. It was decades, a couple decades of this all the time before we finally figure out how to work together and to be a family. A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Solomon knew that. He lived it. He grew up with a ton of brothers, and they fought all the time, just like siblings do. But his brothers also betrayed each other. His brothers were in battles, literally, where they went to war with each other. He had one brother who killed another brother. Solomon lived this stuff, and so he knows what he's talking about when he gives us advice about family. And Solomon is saying, in this complicated world that you live in, that I live in, even in a God-fearing family, your family can be your greatest ally, and they can be your worst enemy, right? Because stuff gets messy. Stuff gets, we all got stuff. What a wise person does, Solomon's going to show us, is that they work to do their part to the best of their ability, as far as it depends on them. A wise person tries to maintain healthy relationships with their family. Is it always possible? No. Is it always the right target to shoot for? Yes. And the book of Proverbs is big enough to adapt to whatever your situation is, a parent, a child, a grandparent, an adult child, whatever you are today. And so let me share with you just kind of rapid fire some different things. This is not like a super linear sermon. I'm just going to kind of jump around with some different principles that Solomon teaches about family in the book of Proverbs. And we're going to start with parents, okay? Talk about parenting and what does that look like. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10, you have seen this verse many times over the last 3 months. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And that's the foundation. That's the kind of the main theme of what this whole book says. Everything in your life, if you want to be wise, begins with the fear of the Lord. But what's really interesting is what Solomon says just a few chapters later about parenting, chapter 14, verse 2. He says this. He says, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress. Cool. And for their children, it will be a refuge. How many of us would do anything that we could to keep our children safe? Man, we put up cameras, we put up doorbell cameras, we do home security systems, and you teach your kids about stranger danger, and you teach them how to buckle their seatbelts, and we teach them to stay out of the street, and we teach them about drugs. You do anything to keep your children safe. You'd sacrifice your life for them. Those are all good things. Those are all good things. We ought to do them. But Solomon is saying in this verse that fearing the Lord is not only the beginning of wisdom for you as an individual, it's also the number one best thing that you can do for the safety and security of your children. Whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for their children, it will be a refuge. If you want your children to be safe, if you want them to have a fortress, fear the Lord. You want them to have a safe space, fear the Lord, and teach them how to do that. Show them what that looks like to do in your own life. Teach them the Bible yourself. Teach them to pray. Teach them how to be involved in the church. Teach them how to give generously. Show them how to serve selflessly. The family that has a foundation in the fear of God is a family that's building a life on something that is trustworthy and solid. It's building and forming kids who are going to have wisdom. Parents, we start with fearing the Lord ourselves. And let me say 2 other things of parents from the Proverbs. Here's one of these things. Proverbs 8:32. This is Lady Wisdom that's talking, okay? We talked a little bit about her. This is wisdom personified as this woman who is a person of character and stature and super important. Lady Wisdom is talking. But this could be the voice of any mom. This could be the voice of any dad. And here's what Proverbs 8:32 says. It's Lady Wisdom says, "Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways." That's a big claim, isn't it? It's a big claim for wisdom, but it's even a bigger claim if we make it ourselves as parents. Hey, listen to me. Imitate me. Do what I do. Do the kinds of things that I say are important. If you do what I do, you'll be fine, kids. things will be better for you. And sometimes we feel like that, talking to our children, right? We're giving them advice, telling them how to live, because we've been around the block and we've got a lot more miles under our belt. We've seen a lot more things than they have, and so we know what works and what doesn't. And if my kid would just listen to me and do what I say, do what I do, they'd be, better off. But parents, here's the thing. We can't get ahead of ourselves, because the question that you and I have to be able to answer first, before we start in on our kids, is this. Am I a parent who is worthy of being imitated? Before I can say to my kid, listen to me, you'll be blessed if you do what I do, I have to ask myself, am I a parent whose life is worthy of being imitated? I don't want my kids on electronics too much. So what's my screen time look like? I don't want my kid to talk to me in a snarky way or some belligerent way. Do I talk that way sometimes to them? I want my kid to get all their chores done before they go out to play or do whatever. Do I get all my stuff done before I plop down in my easy chair? Am I a parent whose life is worthy of being imitated? You've got your own questions. All those questions have been asked in my home by me and by my kids too, right? And they're fair to ask me that, because I have to ask myself, am I a parent worthy of being imitated? Am I modeling wisdom myself? And here's the last thing that Proverbs says to parents. The love that we have for our kids doesn't just model it. We want to model it. That's super important. But the love we have for our kids also teaches wisdom. And so what does that mean? Let's talk about discipline for just a minute. Everybody's favorite topic when it comes to parenting. 3 Proverbs that talk about discipline. They all kind of make the same point. First one, Proverbs 22:15. Solomon says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. Do you know what that means? It means that kids are fools by nature. Kids are fools by nature. They are simpletons. They don't understand how life really works yet. They may think that they do, but they are wrong, because folly is bound up in the heart of a child. It's even worse than them just being wrong, because this foolishness, this folly that they have, is bound up in them. It's tied to their heart so tightly that it is very, very difficult to get it out of them. But it has to be done. It has to be driven out by the rod of discipline, Solomon says. Second Proverb, 13:24. It has to be done because, Solomon says, whoever spares the rod hates their children. Wow, that's strong, isn't it? But the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Okay? Both those proverbs got this rod of discipline. What's Solomon talking about? Maybe you have a picture in your head of what the rod of discipline looks like. I asked AI, second time I did that this week, to create an image of the rod of discipline that I experienced growing up as a child in the Hannum household. So I kind of gave it a description, kind of gave it parameters for what the rod of discipline looked like in my house. And this is what it came up with on the very first draft. It is remarkably accurate. It gives me the heebie-jeebies kind of looking at it, because you see all those holes in it. You know why those holes are in there? That's exactly right. Increases the velocity on the swing. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. That was the rod of discipline in the Hannum household. It was very effective. It was very effective. I don't know what your rod of discipline looks like or looked like in your home. And this is not a sermon about corporal punishment, okay? It's not a message. We're not going to debate about spanking or that kind of thing today. We can have conversations about that, and that's fine. But the bigger point of what Solomon is saying in these Proverbs is this. Wise parents discipline their children. They discipline their children. The word discipline in Proverbs is not a word that means beat the tar out of them. That's not what it means. The word discipline in Proverbs is a word that means training someone through correction and instruction. Training someone through correction and instruction. And here's why this is important. The end of Proverbs 13:24, that second half of the verse says, The one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. The fact is, parents who don't discipline well don't love their kids well. Wow, that's tough, isn't it? Parents who don't discipline well aren't loving your kids well. Because those kids have hearts that are bound up in folly. They're bound up in stupidity and in foolishness. And it needs to be, they need you to pull that out of them, to rip that out of them if they're going to grow up and live skillfully. This folly that's in a kid, every kid, every teenager, the folly that's in there, it's not going to come out by itself. It doesn't. It's not. They're not just going to magically grow up and it'll kind of be gone. That's not how it works. And so if we fail to do this as parents, if we fail to lovingly train and correct them, then here's the third proverb. Solomon says this, Proverbs 19:18. He says, "Discipline your children, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death." When you and I, as parents, neglect your duty to train and correct your kid, you let them do whatever they want, whenever they want, and there's no guardrails on your kids' lives. When there's no boundaries, it's laissez-faire. I'm gonna let my kid find themselves. When we do that to our children, I can tell you from I've been watching this now for decades, watching parents. When you do that, it doesn't work that well in real life, for one thing. And for another, it definitely won't work well for their future. Can I tell you why? The reason why is this. Children who run the household are children who are being set up to fail in life because life has an order. Life has this design that God has built into it and designed into it. And in that order that God has created, every single one of us answers to somebody. Right? We all answer to someone. And when we as parents don't act as the authority in our family, when we cede that authority, when we give that authority over to a child, and instead it's their schedule that runs everything, and it's their wants, and it's their wines, and it's their flights of fancy that kind of rules the roost, when that happens, then we're setting them up to fail down the road, and none of us want that for our kids. We want our kids to learn to live wisely because there's always going to be somebody in charge of them, and they need to learn that. So lovingly discipline and train them now while you can. Parents. All right? Discipline, that's a whole lot of fun to talk about. Let me talk to the teens in here for just a second. I see several of you in here, and hopefully there's some on our live stream today or watching this later on. Let me talk to some of you teens because sometimes you don't do what you ought to do. Shocker, right? I mean, sometimes you don't do what you ought to do. And if your parents love you well, teenagers, you are going to be disciplined. And when that happens, Solomon has something to say to you as a teenager, as a child. Solomon has something to say to you when you get disciplined. Here's what he says to students. And he's talking in this verse about the Lord's discipline of all of us, but it applies to everybody. He actually connects it to parenting himself. Here's what he says. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11. Solomon says, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline," and we can say dad and mom's discipline too, "and do not resent his rebuke," and don't resent their rebuke, because the Lord, or your mom and dad, disciplines those he loves, as a father does the son that he delights in. So the advice from Solomon to you, the command from Solomon to you, teenagers, is don't despise discipline. Don't despise it. Don't despise your mom and dad when they give it to you. Your mom says, you're going to have to do that chore again. You're going to have to clean that counter again. You're going to have to wash those dishes again because you didn't do it well enough the first time. Your mom says, you screwed up with your phone. You misused it. We had rules. You didn't follow them. I'm going to have to take it away. I'm going to take away the keys because you're driving 97 miles an hour. I saw it on Life 360 app. You're driving too fast. I'm going to take the keys away. Don't despise the discipline of your mom and dad. Don't resent rebuke. Your dad says to you, he says, "Hey, don't talk to your mom that way. It's not okay. It's not acceptable." Your mom says, "You lied to me. That's not acceptable, That's not okay. It's disrespectful." Don't resent rebuke. Solomon says, kids, don't despise it and don't resent it because good parents only discipline the children that they delight in. That's what the proverb says. Students, I get it, and your mom and dad, they get it, and every adult in here gets it. It's very hard to see your parents how they delight in you when they're disciplining you, right? But it's essential for you as a teenager, as a student, to see that, to keep you from despising them. Delight in you and discipline are not opposites. They can work together. And let me see if I can make this visual for you students, all right? Hopefully this works. We'll see what happens. Parents, quick question. Anybody who's a parent in this room, if you take or took, maybe you're an older parent, we're talking about past stuff, if you take great joy in disciplining and correcting and training and teaching and rebuking your kids, raise your hand really high. If you take great joy in that. Teenagers, look around. Look around. Swivel your heads. Look. No, I'm dead serious. Don't look at me. Look around. How many hands are up? Okay, let me ask the second question. Parents, anybody who's a parent in this room, if you delight in who your kids are, raise your hand really high. Look around, teens. Look. There's not a single parent in here who takes great joy in disciplining you. But every single parent in here delights in who you are. They delight in who you are. And this is important because here's the reason. This is a crucial way that you learn to trust God. By delighting in the discipline of your parents. They are not opposites. You learn to trust God by first learning to trust that your parents have your best interests at heart at all times. It doesn't mean we're always right. We're not. It doesn't mean that we're perfect parents, that we always have the answers. It doesn't mean that. But we do truly delight in you, and we want to see you succeed in life. We want to see you make it. We want to see you become wise, and that is why we discipline you. Teenagers, what you don't always understand, sometimes maybe you forget, is what Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 3. He says this. Solomon says, "For I too was once a son to my father. I too was once still tender and foolish and dumb. I too was once cherished and taken care of by my mother." And this is another part of the why. Don't despise discipline, kids. Here's why. We have been in your shoes. I too was once young. I too know what it's like to be unlearned and foolish and unwise and to have folly bound up in my heart. And your mom does too. And your dad does too. We know exactly what it's like. And kids, it's so easy to forget this or not to understand this truth that we, as your mom and dad, we so often give you advice out of our own failures, right? We give you advice because of the stupidity of the things that we've done. And we don't want you to have to repeat those mistakes, right? You go, make up your own dumb mistakes. Just don't do the ones that we did. Don't despise the discipline of your parents, but focus on their delight in you. How do you like that, teenagers? Pretty fun advice? Not. Parents and teenagers, let's talk just a minute about the potential legacy of your family. A lot of you in here today are adult children like me, out of your parents' home. You're raising your own kids, maybe your grandparents. You're no longer in the thick of, kind of the day-to-day of those preschool and elementary and high school years. But you're still part of a family, okay? And so what can that look like? Let me talk first real quick to adult children. Here's what Solomon says. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 26. He says, "Whoever robs their father and drives out their mother is a child who brings shame and disgrace." I don't know how many of you are robbing your parents or driving out a parent, but I do know that Tim Keller says if we take this verse and flip it the other way, it's a negative verse right now. If we flip it the other way, he points out that the opposite of that kind of a child and the kind of child that we want to be is a child who honors their parents. Instead of despising them, we want to, instead of disgracing them, we want to be children that honor our parents. And so, I get and I understand that all of us in here have had different parents. And some of you may have had awesome parents, and that's awesome. And some of you may have had mediocre parents, and some of you may have had terrible parents. I'm sorry for you, okay? But in all those cases, no matter what your parent was like or is like, maybe they were terrible, maybe they're awesome, you can always honor them. And Tim Keller shares a short list. I've just chosen a few of them that he mentioned of ways that you can honor your parents as adult children. Here's one. He says, find appropriate symbolic gestures to show them respect to your parents. So it's things like maybe putting them at a certain seat at the table. Maybe it's giving them the right to speak first into a certain situation. Maybe it's things like taking their special days and making them even more special. It's things like calling them for their advice. All kinds of symbols. You can think of lots of other ways to show your parents respect as an adult child. Here's the second thing he says. Remind them of things that they did that helped form and shape you in good ways. Remind them of that. Every parent loves they feel super respected and honored when you come back to them and when you come to them and say, thank you for doing this. Thank you for teaching me this. No parent is perfect, but every parent taught you at least one good thing that helped shape you and form you into a wise person. Even if you had the worst parents in the world, you learned by the opposite, right? You learned, I don't want to do that. Okay? Tell them thank you for helping you to be a better person. That's a way to honor them. Here's the last thing he mentions, and this one kind of caught me off guard. He said a way that you can honor your parents as adult children is to be liberated from them. Be liberated from them. There's a reason that Jesus confirms that a man shall leave his mother and leave his father and be united with a woman who has also left her mother and left her father and start their own new thing. There's a reason why he said we start a new family, a new unit. When you become a true adult and you grow up and you leave your mom and dad and get out of the basement, out from under the stairs, and you're out paying your own rent and doing your own thing, and you don't need their approval anymore. It's nice if you have it, but you don't need it anymore. When you have become that kind of a person, that honors them. And it honors their parenting because they have accomplished, whether they did it in a great way or in a horrible way, they have accomplished one of the primary goals of parenting, which is to help you to grow up and be an adult liberated on your own. So be liberated from your parents. Here's the last thing. That's adult children. Last piece of legacy is grandparenting. What a great time in life. I have never met, that I can remember, I have never ever met a grandparent who did not love being a grandparent. I've never met one. What a great time of life. And so we think about grandparenting and what can we do? Here's what Solomon says about grandparents. Proverbs 13:22. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. They leave an inheritance for their children's children. Grandparents, you've been around long enough that you know this better than most, that each one of us inherits some kind of legacy from our past, from our parents and from our grandparents and from our ancestors. All of us inherit something like that. And all of us as people create some new sort of legacy, create some new sort of inheritance for those who will come after us. And maybe for you, when I talk about inheritances and legacies, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is money and financial kind of a legacy, and that's okay. But legacies and inheritance are not just about money. In fact, I would argue that the money that you pass down, the financial inheritance that you pass down to your kids, is the least important thing. It's the least important thing that you pass down to your grandkids. Because, you know this already, you can't take it with you as a grandparent, right? You know that. They don't necessarily know that yet, but they can't take it with them either. And so the money is the least important thing they're going to pass down. Fortunately for all of us, there are things that are way more important than that we can pass down, and they last a whole lot longer. And you grandparents have the opportunity to leave an incredible family legacy of faith in the Lord and hope for the future for your grandkids and love for the present in their lives right now. And maybe you've been fortunate enough to inherit that from your ancestors yourself and pass that on. Maybe you're kind of had not so great of an inheritance, but you're creating it right now for them in your own life. You have an opportunity to do that as grandparents. Take advantage of it. doesn't last very long, does it? None of us get a perfect family. None of us are a perfect family. None of us are perfect parents or children, but all of us can become people who fear the Lord. All of us can become people who love our families, who give wisdom, who receive wisdom, who leave behind a legacy that points the next generation to faith in the God who created us. And let me pray for you right now that you would become those kind of parents and children. God, we ask that as a prayer in Jesus' name, that you would enable us to become the kinds of parents that you are to us. God, help us to become the kind of children that are like your son Jesus, who accepted discipline on this earth. And he did it delighting and knowing that his parents delighted in him. God, help us to be adult children who honor and respect and bring praise to our parents and our grandparents who have gone before us. God, as grandparents, help us to leave a legacy of that makes such a difference. It's so much bigger than money that we can pass on to our kids, the wisdom that we have accumulated that we can pass on by example and by talking to them, by taking them out to eat and by taking them different places and showing them what it looks like to be wise by fearing the Lord. Help us to be that kind of grandparent, parent, and child. Lord, we love you so much. We're thankful that you are the example of a perfect family between God and your son Jesus, and we try to live up to that. God, we aspire to be that kind of relationship that you have in and of yourself. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Help us to be wise. Amen.